So every month there's a formal, either it's virtual or on-site, formal touch point. But here's the key, I believe, is you got to be willing to be available during the non-formal times, because Rick cannot wait 30 days to talk to Jimmy Casas, and Rick needs Jimmy today because Rick's struggling today and doesn't know what to do with XYZ, and he can't say, well, I got to wait 28 more days till I meet with my coach.
Welcome back to another episode of The Path Forward. As always, I'm your host, Dr. Rick Fernandez, where we talk innovation, education, and the blending of the two. And we're going to throw in a little bit of leadership, some coaching, maybe a little principle talk. I've been wanting to have my next guest for quite some time, and I kept on hearing stuff and seeing stuff, and so I was like, who is this guy? And then I saw him. He was coming to Texas a couple of times. I'm like, all right, let me see what's going on here. And needless to say, Jimmy Casas, just an unbelievable motivator, educator, author. You own your own firm. I mean, you're doing it all. You're everywhere. You're down here in Texas. You're up north. Welcome to the show, man. And it took us a little while to find the time, but I surely appreciate you joining us.
Yeah, thank you, Rick. I'm looking forward to it. Appreciate it. Thank you for your patience. I know the schedules get a little crazy sometimes for both of us, but I always say, if we want to make it happen, we'll make it happen, and we did. So I'm looking forward to it. Thanks.
Absolutely, absolutely. And for some of our folks that may not be familiar with your work, can you just share a little bit about your background, your education history, and then kind of what led you to opening up your own firm and expanding the ability to help districts all across the country?
Yeah, well, first of all, I'm a retired principal. I was a principal for 22 years, Rick. I started my career in Milwaukee Public Schools as a middle school teacher. Took my first principalship at 26 and was blessed enough to do that work in 3 different buildings in a span of 22 years. Left the profession here because for some reason I thought I had this idea that I could actually make a living at this. And I kind of just fell into it, to be honest with you. And just felt very blessed and decided that there came a point when I was a high school principal trying to do both at the same time. Eventually just realized as the work began, growing and growing and growing, that I couldn't do both and sustain both at a high level. So made the decision to leave out on my own and honestly just started, just doing a lot of keynotes and presentations. And then after a couple of years, I realized that, yeah, it was good to do those. And I love doing them. I still love doing them today, but for me, the reason I went into it in the first place is because I just want to help people. And I've learned that it was more meaningful if I could keep working with people. So I kind of made a little pivot there after my second year and decided to try to lean into coaching a little bit. And that has just grown exponentially over the last really 5 or 6 years. So I feel really blessed today to run an executive coaching company. We also opened up a publishing company back in 2022 now, I believe. So actually, yeah, it's 3.5 years ago. So it was right at that time. So just feel very blessed to continue to work with educators every day. And it's a passion of mine. I love to do it. Never get tired of it. And if you love traveling, it's a great gig. And but it's, I'm very grateful. Just, again, I know I'm blessed and I'm just going to keep doing it for as long as I keep doing it. And as long as people find value in what I do, then I'm going to keep trying to do the very best I can to do that work. So that's where I'm at today.
That's awesome. I got to ask you a personal question. So when you made the switch, right, like, if you're like me, you're really thinking about like, man, I'm going to jump into kind of the same thing with very familiar components, but now I'm in the private sector. Now I've got to be thinking more with a business mindset. When you talk to your family about the transition or like, hey, I'm going to do this, or your mentors, like, how did that conversation go? Were you nervous? Did they have to kind of push you, or was it like, man, I'm all in and who's coming with me?
It kind of sounded like this. You're going to do what?
We all on the same. Yep.
And then it ended with, but I believe in myself.
So there's a little bit of convincing going on in the house. Is what I'm getting at.
But honestly, if I'm being really honest, the hardest part was probably leaving my last child I was a high school principal where my kids went to the school, right? So
Oh, wow.
My baby would always say, "Daddy, you're going to be here, right? When I graduate, right?" I said, "Of course I am, honey. Of course I am." And then as the work just kept piling on, I tell people this, and I mean, this is a true story. She actually finally said to me, "Dad, listen, you don't need to stick around for me. I know you're going to go do great things." So, and when she gave me that permission, it was like, oh my God, I love you. I don't know who raised you, but it must have been your mother, because that was amazing. And when I got that, it was hard to leave, and it's still hard, right? Because I love being a principal. I mean, I didn't leave because I didn't like being a principal. I love being a principal. I'd go be a principal today. But I also love what I do now, and then the fact that I get to still work with in schools literally on a daily basis, right? And we are more of an executive coaching company. That means I get to walk alongside principals, be in classrooms, actually coach people and support them in their roles. It's pretty awesome. So yeah, I feel very blessed to do that.
That's awesome. Well, I think still to this day, my favorite role as an educator was high school principal. Much more, I love that much more than a superintendent, even an assistant superintendent. Just because you're there with the kids, you're in the work, you've got the pulse. It's just a different vibe. So I totally align with your sentiment. I do want to ask you though, right? So you've been out of it, not out of it, but in a different lens through education. And as you're working with principals, what are some of the things that you've noticed that may be challenges that they're going through that maybe you or I didn't have to go through in our tenure? Are there new things that are kind of just like, all right, we got to help them solve for this because this is a new phenomenon dealing with education?
Yeah, so I left the profession right there at the 2016-17 school year. So I can, just right there on the cusp of what I would say is this. I certainly sensed it myself, even, and that is, but not like it is today. And I certainly see the leaders that I work with. I would say the number one thing right now is just the level of scrutiny they deal with every day. It's incredible that how much they're being scrutinized in their work, and quite frankly being judged, and people being hypercritical. And then of course with social media just kind of blows that up. It really just messes with them a lot, right? The fact that there's a huge different political climate than there was when I left too, and that creates its own issues, and so those are the two biggest things I think they're dealing with right now. And then probably the third thing I would say is I don't think it's different, so I have to figure this out a little bit, but there seems to be maybe the issues are more complex, and there's a more demand that the principal be more of everything. So
Yeah.
if anything, maybe they've lost their focus a little bit because they're expected to do so many things. Although there was a little bit of that for me too, right? But I think that kind of goes back to where we're at, because I do think the issue I'm seeing right now, Rick, I don't know what you're seeing, but I do notice that there are a lot, especially in the superintendent role, because of the fact that there's still so many. I mean, that's probably the hardest job because of the political climate for them.
Oh,
It
yes.
doesn't mean that I always thought the high school AD had the toughest job, then the high school principal, then the superintendent. But I might flip that today just because of the political climate. But what I would say is this: I see a lot of individuals going into the superintendent, but they've only been a principal for 3, 4, 5 years. And so it's not that they're necessarily younger, they're just less experienced going into that role. And it's the same thing for administrators. When I became an administrator at 26, I was an anomaly. It's not uncommon for me to go into districts all over the place now, and there are 25, 26, 27-year-old principals everywhere, where that was not, in my day, you had to put in your time, right? 15 years or 20 years, and then maybe you'll get a shot at it when you're 45. And it's not like that anymore today. So I would say that's exactly what I'm seeing every day everywhere I go.
So do you feel like there's more urgency with you and your team to upskill at a rapid pace because of some of the gaps in experience, or chaos creates opportunity to some degree, and so younger folks are hey, maybe I can take my shot and do well at this and be a leader. Is it affecting how you work with principals, understanding like they're probably not going to have the type of experiences that we were accustomed to?
Yeah, to be fair, though, to be honest, I'm not sure. I mean, if you think about it, are any of us really ever ready for the job,
Yeah,
right? Right.
that's
That's one thing I always had in the back of my mind. But certainly, I mean, to be an effective leader, you do have to have a tremendous skill set, right? Now, the problem is
yeah.
because of the scrutiny, where when I became a principal, way back early 90, I could make a mistake and I'm not going to get beat up for it, right? And nobody would even know I made the mistake. But today you make those mistakes, and because they're so highly scrutinized, they don't get a lot of passes, right? So there is this, I feel like a more sense of pressure on them. But what I focus a lot about, honestly, is skill development. These are a lot of skills that they're lacking. right? If you think just in terms of how to truly implement a process that's effective, right? So if you're going to implement a new initiative, let's say, for example, well, that's a skill, right? There is a skill to actually layering and implementing an initiative and taking something to scale to make sure it's successful. It's like running a business, right? You just don't go 100 miles an hour and try to expand all over the country, or your business is going to die very quickly, right? And we know that a lot of small businesses fail because they grow too fast. Well, it's no different being a principal. I have the other problem, but I had the same problem when I was younger and went in. I was passionate, I was driven, I had tremendous work ethic, but there was nobody around to slow me down, right? That's what I tell people. So I'm constantly trying to slow people down, because what I'm seeing is they're moving so quickly is they get really sloppy. And when they get sloppy, I say they're the ones actually creating what I call the undercurrents, which is the things that are actually hurting the culture and the morale of the organization. It's the way they're managing in that's actually creating that. That's what I see. So what I do when I go in is I really focus on helping them identify not only the undercurrents in the organization that are hurting the culture and the morale, et cetera, but more importantly, that how are they causing them? They're the ones causing the undercurrent. And that's
so more of a reflective.
That's classroom, building, and district level. Everybody is. That's what I focus on.
I like that point. So the windstorm of all the activity and all of the components that go into leading a building or a district, and yet if you're moving at too fast a rate, you're causing all this chaos that you probably aren't even aware of. Right. And guilty as charged. I'm just going to,
we all are. Me too. Me too. Right. That's why I see it now. Right. I couldn't see it then. But that's where I think the coach really serves a purpose, because they come out from an outside perspective and they can see it. You see it much quicker when it's out there than when you're the one causing it, right? You just don't see it. Mm-hmm.
What was your biggest challenge when you reflect, and either internally or externally? Like, man, this is the one thing that I struggled with the most, and it took a while to get through it.
Yeah, I would say early on. Remember, everybody has a story of why they struggle wherever they struggle, right? So if you think about it, when I became a principal, I tell people when I walked into a building for the first time, I had teachers who had been teaching longer than I've been alive, and I'm supposed to be leading them, right? So certainly early on, there were two issues, I would say. One was the belief. Again, you got to know the story, right? Why does a young individual go into a building and believe that he can do everything, that I can take care of everybody, but I can fix every problem, I'm a servant leader? Well, we have something to prove, right? I got to prove to these people that I belong here, right? Like, who is this guy, right? Like, why is he here? And so you have you feel this immense amount of pressure, at least I did, not to, first of all, I didn't want to fail. Like, who wants to fail, right? I have a superintendent who took a risk on me, so I don't want to let that person down. I have a family here that I don't want to let down. I got my parents who sacrificed everything to actually give up their own education, as migrant workers, to move, to say we need to give our children the quality of life that we were never able to have, the opportunities that we never had. Well, you feel that pressure. And then I'll just really be honest, as a Latino, I felt the pressure of, man, I can't screw this up for the Latinos, because there's already not any of us out there because they don't believe we can do the job, and I don't want to be the guy who screws it up. So all that layered in means, well, that's why somebody goes in and tries to fix everything and do everything. So what did I struggle with? Honestly, I just did too much. I just burned out, right? You just go 100 miles an hour, and I learned from that, right? And I see it differently in a different perspective. So one is the ability to build capacity. How do you actually build the capacity? And how do you trust people to build the capacity, right? And what does that even look like? And so we have to define it. And so I look at building capacity today, really it's teaching. You have to teach people the skills so they develop the confidence and the capability to do what you're asking them to do, so you don't have to worry that it's not getting done the way you want it to get done, right? And so that's an area for sure. The second area I struggled in, and this is an area I see almost everywhere I go, Rick, this is an area I spend a lot of time on, it's how to really manage those really, really complex conversations. Because the skill is to hold people to a higher level of accountability, but do it without hurting your culture. That's the skill. Anybody can hold someone accountable. Yeah, but you're going to leave a path of destruction behind, right? That's the problem. And all that creates undercurrents, hurts the morale, hurts the culture. And so now you violate trust. It's really hard to move an organization that doesn't trust. So, and then the third thing I'd probably say that kind of goes along with the building capacity is the inability to understand even how to build a high performing team. And so that's what I focus on now. Like, I mean, think about it. If the admin in a building that I go into, if it's clear to me that they don't have a high performing team, I always say to them, then how are you going to build a team out there? How are you ever going to build that third grade team or that seventh grade team or that social studies department when you don't even have a high performing team? So those are the areas, not only for myself, I struggled in, but those are areas I still see today, which is really interesting, right? That the problems that existed back in 1991, 92 are still the same problems today. Why? Because I think they're all behavior issues. I think these are behavior problems.
Yeah.
And
people problem. It's people
that's
problem.
never going to change. These are people problems. And quite frankly, they're adult behaviors. It's the adult behaviors that are causing the culture issues everywhere I go. That's why I would say we cause the culture. We're the undercurrent.
Oh, no doubt. There's no doubt. No. I mean, I've always said, education would be great if it was just the kids and me, and I could we could do our thing, because all of the emotions that go into leading and the time that it takes to like you said, understand that we've got to move forward, but do it in a way that protects people's dignity and their careers, and still have the pressure of, hey, you got to perform. Our realtors are not going to stand for a district that's a C or D district, right? That ain't going to happen. So that's a great point of view of all of the components that are having to be coached and learned, and oftentimes make an error and then have to learn it the hard way. I do want to ask you, what do you find most effective? Because that's a lot, right? And what's if you're going to say, all right, blank check, we need some help, what is the methodology that you use that you feel like this is the most effective way in which we coach?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a monopoly on this any more than anybody else does, right? I mean, I certainly have my opinions based on my own experiences, what I've learned throughout not only my own career, but obviously, I mean, just even as a high school principal, I mean, what worked for us when people would come into PD, right? First of all, I always resented people who would come in and try to sell me a program or sell me something. Like, dude, you've never even been in our school. Like, you don't even know my kids. You don't know our classrooms. You don't know our building. You're convincing me, like, if you buy this, it'll solve all your problems. And so, first of all, I've always remembered that. So I'm never going to be that guy, right? Like, I'm not there to sell anything. I'm there to teach. In fact, what I tell people is everything I work on is free. It's just change your behavior, right? Change your behavior. It doesn't cost a penny, but we have to see how that all unfolds. So that's one thing I would say. The second thing, Rick, I would say is that I think the best professional learning or development or whatever you want to call it is when people actually want it. So here's my mindset. I believe that it is my job to go into a classroom, a building, a campus, a conference, whatever it is, whatever the audience is. This is how I see it. I got one shot to walk in there and create an experience that they want more of. Because that's the best professional learning. Because now it's not being done to them. It's not being they actually want it because they see it and say, I want that. That's who I want to be again. I see value in that. That's what I try to create. So that's on me. That way I don't have to worry about anything else. Jimmy, you need to do what you need to do. And if you can't do it, then you're going to have to own that. Then you better get better at what you do or you're not going to survive in this work. Right. So, So I kind of work backwards like that. I'm a little weird like that. I just tell clients, hey, let's not get too far ahead of ourselves. Let's do what we call the launch. That's what I call it in my company. Let's do the launch first. If the launch goes well, then yes, my question to you is, then what? Because if it goes well and you don't do anything with it after that, that's on you now. You're creating that undercurrent because that means you don't have a plan. You're just here and then here and then here, and I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, but you really don't have a plan. So that's how I see it today. So that's what I try to do is be really intentional, but very, very transparent and authentic about it. But it's my job to create the experience that they want to hire me. I'm not there to sell. I don't market. I don't reach out and do cold calls. I'm all word of mouth. Go to the website or word of mouth. That's how people get hired us. So, and that's worked so well. So I'm just going to keep doing it that way because I think people appreciate that.
Well, so you about 90% of the reason that I wanted to have you on and learn more and just, be a part of what you're doing is because of that, right? I didn't see anything that it was an advertisement. It wasn't an email. It was none of that. I was seeing friends and colleagues and how passionate they were about what you were providing. And I said, this is something that's not, canned and planned and some formulaic thing, because if it was, it wouldn't have this type of response. So that resonates with me. And that was one of the main reasons. Like, I don't want to be, like you said, the people can spot a phony. Kids are the quickest. Adults are for the most part quick, but they can spot BS very, very quickly. And if you're not willing to get in there and do the work and listen and at least spend some time understanding, it's not going to go well. Thinking about the need for coaching, because I feel like it's just grown exponentially, and I don't know about it, everywhere else in the country, but Texas has a massive funding issue, and I'm not going into the politics of it, but there are so many districts that have deficit budgets, and so things are being cut, and a lot of the time and effort and resources that we're spending coaching now are no longer available to not only our leaders but our teachers as well. Do you find that there's now more of a need due to the funding, and are people utilizing it for long enough? I always feel like, look, if something's working well, it's not a one and done. Like, this is a continuous growth kind of process, right? It can't just be one and done. Do you get a feel like it's needed even more? And yet there's times when people pull the plug because, okay, that was great, and let's go to something else.
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody has to examine, right, where they want to spend their dollars to bring the most value that they can. For years, we saw a lot of leaders pouring into their teachers, and rightfully so, right? Teachers needed a lot of support, but eventually what we saw is just a little bit of an inequity in the balance of, but wait a second, but where's the PD dollars that are really being poured into administrators? Well, if you think about it, back when we were in the field, a lot of that was really just going to conferences, right? Well, the problem with that is that's not a sustainable model, right? You're not. So eventually at some point there began to be a little shift, and that's just what I saw. So I felt like I just entered at the perfect time for that perfect storm to say, hey, eventually there came the part of saying, hey, what we're recognizing is if we're going to support our teachers, we probably need to support the building leaders and the campus leaders just as much, right? But what happened, I think, Rick, at least, again, I can only speak for some of the experiences, is again, it became one of those things where we said, hey, Rick, we're going to get a coach for you. And you're like, well, why are you getting a coach for me? Did I do something wrong? I mean, I don't need a coach, right? And so it's the way we integrated coaching, I think, was where we kind of erred a little bit. And I say we, I mean, the profession erred a little bit.
Yeah.
And that's why even for us, I think we were a little bit more strategic and said, no, like even when a superintendent calls me, Rick, like just now, I literally just got off a call right before I got on with you up in New York. And I said, hey, let's just look at it a little differently, because they're calling me because they're frustrated with their principals. But what they don't see is they're the ones causing that. See, they want to blame the principals. They're the ones that actually need coaching, right? The irony of that, right? That's what they don't see. That's the skill that I have to get there with them without hurting their feelings about that. Like, I didn't call you to talk to me. I need you, that kind of thing. So I just try to be real with people, because I think we're all responsible for it, right? I said, listen, it'd be like your principal right now coming to you and saying, hey, it's the teacher's fault, right? It's no different. You got to see that. And won't we get frustrated when teachers do that to kids? So I see, my job is to help them see all that, because they don't see it because they're frustrated. And so I say, hey, listen, I'm not judging you. But what I'm saying to you is, before you call me to say my principals need coaching, how about this? What if we just come in and just let us show you what we can do? And if we can create an experience that the key is, you want your principals to want the coaching. See, you do not see as you're doing it to them again. You're telling them that they need a coach or a principal or help or whatever. How about you just say, hey, listen, I need some work. I'm going to bring someone in to create an experience for us. Let's see how it goes and see if there's any value this person can bring to us. See, that's different. And now there's no threat. And then my job is to get them to go, yeah, we want that. And I said, see, isn't that a win for you? You're going to end up at the same place, but now they're asking for it and you're not doing it to them. There's already enough of that already. I do think that builds a little bit of mistrust. So I'm always say, transparent leaders are effective leaders, right? If you're not transparent, there's always going to believe there's a little bit of an agenda, and they're always trying to figure you out. So my point of all that is that, yes, I do believe that from a coaching perspective, that why are we not pouring into building leaders who, quite frankly, in my experience, right now, everywhere I go, they have literally been handed a set of keys and say, go be a principal. And if we're not coaching these people, that is not fair to them. because we're asking them to walk into a job that is really, really complex, and they're going to need some support. So that's just how I see it. So, yeah.
No, I agree 100%. And the thing that we're trying to do is turns out to be exactly opposite of what happens, because those principals that are not prepared, they don't last. Your school suffers, kids leave, you lose funding. Like, there's all of those components when it could be mitigated with just a little bit of thought and foresight and strategy and good planning, So
Yeah, one
I
thing I
totally
didn't say,
understand
Rick,
that.
and I apologize. One thing I didn't say is,
No.
I just remembered you asked this part, and that is, so when you think about coaching, right, there has to be some longevity to it, because of the fact that literally coaching is about building trust. You got to be a connector to build the trust, because you literally have a complete stranger walking into your building. And it's like, oh my goodness, is this person going to be judging me? Is this person going to go to my superintendent and tell them what I am and not doing? I mean, all those things are real for people, right? But I always have to remind the principals, listen, but you're telling me you want teachers to go into other classrooms and observe them, but yet you won't even do it yourself. See, that's what they need to see. So I'm always a believer we shouldn't ask people to do what we're not willing to do ourselves. So go back to the superintendent. Hey, if you're going to coach your principals, how about you get coaching too? Because now you can say to your principals, guys, look, I'm going to get some coaching because I need some support. I'm hoping you guys will also join me in that, because I think we all kind of need to work on some things. And here's a couple of things to consider, that type of thing, right? So we're kind of all doing it. But the coaching for me, I do tell people, listen, to be fair to me and to be fair to my team, I'm not asking you to commit to 2 years. What I am asking you, first of all, is will you commit that if all goes well in year one, which I can show you some data and give you, and we can take the feedback from your principals that they're finding value and this is helpful, and I can show you what we're doing and we're all agreeing on this, then I would ask for 2 years, because literally it takes us a semester to really understand the dynamics of what's going on that campus or in that building, to build that trust. What we typically see in that second semester, the movement starts. And by that second year, you really start moving pretty quickly. They're using the language, they're understanding how to put processes into place, they're developing frameworks, and they're starting to move the system, right? Now, that system is whatever we decide, right? That means principal, superintendent, myself, or whoever, is what are we actually focused and working on, right? And how does that align with your strategic plan or your school improvement plan? I mean, we're not just going in there and going all over the place, but there's always a little piece, what we call just a little problems of practice, right? That's the real part of the job for them. That stuff's just going to come up and they don't know how to deal with it, but we're always tied in. So there has to be a strategy to it. And what we call it, obviously, in our company is a framework. You got to coach from some sort of framework to be consistent and to be clear, right, in terms of actually what we're actually doing and working on if we're ever going to assess it. So those are some things to consider too.
Fair enough. And I would agree, if 1 year for anything is never going to bear the fruit that you want, nor give you a good, accurate indicator of, like, is this valuable? Is this sustainable? Is it something that we need to keep, particularly when you're dealing with, like you said, people and coaching and emotions and probably a little bit of stress on that in that first year. I want your opinion on this. And as a former college athlete, and coaching has always meant a little bit different, something different. And what I've struggled with my entire career is the cadence in which we coach. Because if you were to look out at your soccer field, your baseball field, your basketball court, and observed a week of practice, what would that look like, and how specific and how frequent does feedback need to be given? Does it need to be shared? And then we turn around in education, and depending on where you are in your protocol and your compliance, we marginally coach within a semester, or we see people once or twice, or we see a teacher once or twice. How do we build in the cadence that's needed to where coaching can be not only reflective but in the moment, and we can do it enough to where we're actually seeing results, and then too much time doesn't go by, so now it's totally lost its value? Just your thoughts and opinions, like, how do we reconcile that in education?
Yeah, I'm going to speak to leaders right now, since we had kind of started that conversation that way. But
Yes.
typically, if we go back, and again, there has to be some structure to it, right? And there has to be a
Right.
plan of how to incorporate this. So obviously, this can go a lot of different paths, but the fundamental basis would be typically is, let's get to what the core of all this is. And number one is You've already used the word ongoing and consistent, but it's the touch points that have to be ongoing and consistent when it comes to coaching, right? That's to be the first thing I would say. So whatever that map looks like, it has to be somewhat strategic. So again, typically for us, it would start as a launch. I have a little bit of information on this just because I've tried it different ways, and I kind of feel like I've landed where that what I would call the sweet spot. So I'm just really honest with districts and say, look, we'll do whatever we'll help find an entry point. Our job isn't to come in and blow up your system. Your system is fine, trust me. However, can it be better? Are there areas that we can improve in? Are there pockets that are not doing and functioning at the level we want them? Of course there are. So let's identify that. We'll find an entry point with all of you. We'll teach you a process in doing so it doesn't seem like we're coming in and telling you. No, we're going to get information from you and see if we can all come to consensus on where our entry point actually is. But then having said that, typically the model that is the most successful is you have to have some on-site visits, in my opinion. If you're only doing virtual, I use the word quotation coaching, only virtual coaching, I don't see that as the best method of coaching. I don't even see it as true coaching. And the reason is because coaching to me is observing. If I can't observe you doing what you say you do, then I'm really not coaching you. It'd be like me and you on a call right now, Rick, and you're telling me everything that's happening in your building. You're giving me your perspective, your viewpoint, your experience. The problem is you didn't even see the undercurrent you created. So how can I even coach you on that, right? I have to use a lot of hypotheticals and, perhaps it was this and maybe it was this. Here's some things to consider. Well, that's fine. But if I would have saw it, I could have just said, Rick, here's what you didn't see, right? Boom, done, right? So again, it's not a judgment, it's for reflection. And okay, so what are we going to do about that, right? Let's find out what happened there. What made you make that? What did you feel the need to make that decision right in the moment, right? It's because they feel rushed, they feel pressured, whatever, right? They're impulsive. I don't know. There's 100 reasons. But my job is to figure out that reason. That's what a coach does. It helps them see what they don't see. That's what I tell people. I will help you see what you do not see, but I need to see you do it. So I believe, because again, it's got to be sustainable. Yeah, of course it would be great for me to be every month on campus with Rick. But the reality is, I mean, you got to think about dollars. How far can they stretch the sustainability? So I feel like 2 times in the fall, 2 times in the spring on site is enough, in my opinion, at least in our experience. The next thing is in between visits, there has to be a formal meeting, which means a virtual session. That's okay too. We got to make sure our touch points are consistent. So every month there's a formal, either it's virtual or on-site, formal touch point. But here's the key, I believe, is you got to be willing to be available during the non-formal times. Because Rick cannot wait 30 days to talk to Jimmy Casas, and Rick needs Jimmy today because Rick's struggling today and doesn't know what to do with X, Y, Z. And he can't say, well, I got to wait 28 more days till I meet with my coach. Well, no, he needs me today, so he'll call me today, and that's okay. So again, that's where I think we bring value to people, and how do we create this system, right? But then again, even within coaching, you got to be very strategic, because in my company, we call this layering. Yes, we're coaching the principal, but we're also strategically at the same time actually coaching the admin team if they have one. And we're certainly coaching a building leadership team if we have one. But if you're a campus hiring us, then yes, the touch points would still look the same, but you're doing intersessions where you're bringing all leaders together at least 2 or 3 times a year. Because if you're only going to coach a segment, you got to be careful how those are selected, first of all, because if not, again, it's going to look like, well, why am I getting punished and having to do this coaching thing, right? As opposed to why are they? Oh, it must be because we're in trouble or we're on the hot seat or whatever, right? But it's honestly usually because of dollars, because they can't afford to coach everybody that way. But that's okay. But we can do it in large group, and then we can do cohorts, and then those cohorts can transition in and out. But kind of, again, going back to what you said before, Rick, if you're in a big enough district, you're always going to be hiring people, and you need to have some sort of onboarding process. And wouldn't that be awesome if you said to a guy, Rick, if you come work here, one of the things you're going to love working about here, we support our administrators like no other. In fact, you're going to have a coach assigned to you who will be there to support you as a new person, to onboard you, to support you. That's a whole different mindset and a different place that we're creating an environment now. People want to come work for us. How awesome is that? So.
Oh yeah, I mean, my belief is that as soon as they sign and that first meeting with your HR representative, culture is being set, expectations are being set, and value and investment are being set. And I 100% agree that whether it's a new teacher to the profession or somebody from a different district, different state, when they are offered and they understand, like, hey, you're going to be coached, you're going to be supported, but there's an expectation of continuous growth, year in and year out, for our school district. And to me, it doesn't even shift the culture. It becomes what we do here, and everybody's just aware,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, hey, when you come here, we're going to coach you.
Yep.
There's no role that's not going to get, invested in and supported, for the sake of our kids. So I could not agree any more with that sentiment. It's like, get them a coach when they walk in the door. Doesn't matter how many years, doesn't matter if they're brand new. Invest in those educators immediately if you can,
Yep.
obviously.
Yep.
Okay, I know we're. See, I kept on shooting and trying to stay on track. But I love these. I love the conversation because I always get perspective that I don't think about, or I didn't see, or just the methodologies. You're very methodical with how you think through this. If we're looking at education as a whole, so you've had an experience that you're a business leader, an educator, founder. If you think to all the lessons and things that you've learned, and then you translate that back into the classroom, should we be focusing more on entrepreneurship for students? Just the value in problem solving, like, should that be more of a focus instead of an elective or a CTE course, or however it's done? Isn't there enough value there to, hey, we've got to somehow instill this and embed this into more of what we're doing to serve students?
Yeah, I mean, of course, I think so. And I think it's already happening, Rick, in a lot of the areas that I'm in, right? There's a lot of focus on, because part of that does take a lot of, first of all, it takes a few things. Number one, it takes a shift in a mindset on what the actual classroom is going to look like, right? I've always believed the classroom just isn't within the four walls. It's around the campus, it's in the community, it's even now worldwide, right? If you think about just the connectivity of where we're at today, right?
Yeah.
So that
Yeah.
would be the first thing. So we got to have some shifts in what that looks like. Second of all, it does take a leader who has a vision. Most of that work is being driven by a leader or driven by a teacher who has the support of a leader. But either way, at the end, it's going to take some leadership involvement to get some of this stuff going. Third of all, I do believe, and this is where I get a little frustrated sometimes, because we're really good at talking about community partnerships and so forth. But a lot of that, at least when I hear from businesses, and even in my own situation now, is that there's always this perception that we're going to businesses, give us money, give us money, give us money. But what are we giving them? What's the benefit for them? They can't just be giving money all the time. If it's truly a partnership, they should be getting some of that partnership too.
That's right.
Not that they're not getting something in terms of giving and donating money, but my point of it is we have to be really intentional and really building those community partnerships to say, how can we create that real experience in a community? I mean, we've seen kids who struggle at school, but you see this all the time, right? You'll see a kid who doesn't come to school, and then you'll go to the grocery store that night and they'll think he's the best worker. How's that possible? Because in class, supposedly he doesn't do anything, but look at this kid work here now, right? So again, there's something about putting kids in a true, real work environment that just changes everything, right? So I think we have to create some of those opportunities for kids. And by the way, I do see a lot of these programs, but oftentimes here's what I see for high flyers, which is fine. I think those kids need to be served too, right? I also see it a lot in the agricultural area, or like you said, the CTE area. Fine. I'm for all kids. But the one area I do see often that we forget about is the work experiences and community experiences for our kids with disabilities, right? We should be creating transition programs for these children at a young age coming in, and how to scale that. How do we get our kids with special needs, especially some of those that are low functioning, right, for things that are out of their control, and how do we prepare for not just the high flyers or the kids in, whatever the program is, or it's CTE or it's industrial tech or whatever, but that's how we have to think, like, what are the skills and what is available maybe in our community. Now, let's be fair again. Sometimes people live in communities that those aren't necessarily accessible to them. Well, what are other ways we can do that, right? Whether it's electronically, or I should say virtually, and those types of things. But I do think you have to be really intentional. But as an entrepreneur, I will tell you, there are so many skills to learn in this work, how to scale up, how to build a model. But there's a lot of similarities between an entrepreneur and a high school principal or a middle school principal or superintendent too, right? But there's also things that are different. And so I always say, a lot of the skills that I learned as a principal, I finally figured out when I first started. Because again, I'm not an entrepreneur, people. I'm an educator. What the hell do I know about running a business? And for the first 2 years, I'm kind of floundering. And then one of my mentors says to me, Jimmy, here's what just confuses me. You can tell me how ineffective you were when you first started being a principal, but dude, by the end of your career, you were pretty damn good, right? As a leader, right? I'm just wondering why you don't run your business like you run your school. And I'm like, yeah, why am I not doing that? And then my whole model just shifted. I'm like, well, yeah, why am I freaked out? Just run it like you ran your school, dude. Layer your leadership, get your team. How do you build? Whose voice are you including? Like, duh, right? But that's the mistake again. Like, it's my business. I got to do everything because I got to make sure it's successful. And I feel this pressure. It's like I fell right back in that trap when I was 26 years old and I didn't even see it. See that?
Wow.
It took an outside perspective, an outside mentor coach to say, dude, do you not see this? It's the same thing, but you're just falling right back in that trap again. So it's just funny how you see that stuff sometimes.
That's an awesome story, man. I'm glad you shared that. And I know we're running up against it, but you got to tell me about Culturize. You're a prolific author, and so what do we get? What are we gonna journey? What's the journey when we open just that Culturize and into your mind and into your working and into your philosophy of how we get better, how we coach, how we interact with our educators?
Yeah, that's really interesting, Rick. That's one of those things I just kind of fell into it, right? Like, first of all, what the hell am I doing?
You fell into a lot of stuff.
I do. I am one of the most blessed people. I know I am. Buddy, I count my blessings every day. And I know this ride's going to end someday, and I'm just holding on as long as I can. And when it does, I'll be happy because this guy got way too much out of this. So I give that credit to my mom, who prays the rosary still for me twice a day. So Mama Casas knows what she's doing. So. Anyway, having said that, what I would say is, I think a couple things. Number one is I wrote Culturize when I was still a principal. That's the first thing I would say, right?
Oh, wow.
I believe I wrote it because I just want to tell a story. I think it was authentic. I think it was real. I think it was genuine. Although even though I had no confidence to write it, because I still don't know why it continues to be so successful. Like, I don't know why. I really don't. Other than what people tell me, and this is what people tell me, it has something to do with the fact that everybody can relate to those 4 core principles of Culturize. And what I eventually figured out, even though I really didn't think of it at the time, is Culturize is really just a behavior framework. And I think every one of us can see ourselves in each one of those core principles because I think it reminds us who we were when we sat in the interview chair. That's what I think it is. I think that's the best version of all of us. And that's what people tell me all the time. So it makes sense to me because it's who can argue with those 4 core principles, right? And so it's like, yes, that's why I went into the profession. I want to be that person again. And you can be. You just have to decide that that's who I'm going to be. So I want to be clear that Culturize is a behavior framework. But I wrote Recalibrate because what I learned is that leaders needed a leadership framework and they needed a model. And so my point was, if I could take Culturize and make that the foundation, because I do believe everything starts with the foundation of behavior, because it doesn't matter what program or initiative you're going to implement if you can't even get people to behave in ways that are exceptional, that are great, that are excellent, right? If we're still negative and toxic and opting out and being negative and not willing to work with a teammate, well, then it doesn't matter what initiative you have if you can't even figure out how we're going to behave. And so Recalibrate was written more as a framework for coaching. But then I also always want to stress to people, but I want to teach you how to create your own framework. So that's one of the things our company does with everybody we start with is we start with, well, who do you want to be, right? What's going to be your behavior framework for you? Because that's where I'm going to coach you from. So when Rick gets frustrated and he's talking to me and he's upset about something, I say, it's okay, buddy, listen, go back to your framework. What does your framework tell you? So my question is, why aren't you doing that? Because see, you want to go blame that, but you told me you were going to be this person and right now you're not being that person. Well, you need to figure out is why are you not that person? Because you're frustrated. And that's what the framework will do. It's to protect you so you don't become frustrated, right? And so behavior frameworks and leadership frameworks are important. And that's what we coach and teach because I don't need to sell you anything then. My job is to coach you how to create your own. And that goes way back. If you think about it, how did I start this conversation? I resented people who'd come in and say, here's the framework. Yeah. Here's what you should be doing. Really? How about you help me build my own based on what I need, not what you're trying to sell me? And so that's why I tell people everything I do is free. All you got to do is I'll teach you and then you can do it on your own. But but we're not here to sell products and tools. Obviously, we have books and all that like anybody else, but the frameworks, I just give them away. I give them away every time I talk because I want to help people, right? That's the key. What's the point? So, yeah.
So were you the guy when somebody came in to talk or speak or talk about their product, you got the arms crossed and they're like just mad as all get out because you were being sold?
Actually, I wasn't mad. Actually, I would try to help them. That's what I felt. I was like, buddy, listen, first of all, I know it takes a lot to get. Let me just share a couple things for you to think about, right? First of all, you don't know anything about us, okay? Listen, here's what I would recommend. Spend some time learning who we are. And I actually did that a couple of times with a couple of different salespeople and eventually ended up working with them. And they thanked me for it because they learned something about sales. People, you're so transactional. It is so evident to me, right? That's all this really is. This is not a real relationship, dude. This is a transactional relationship because you want something from me. And, but to me, it starts, that's why I say in our company, we call it connections over contracts. I know the contract's going to end, Rick. They're all going to end. But if we've done our job right, you know, it's not going to end. That connection, that relationship.
That's right.
Or something's wrong.
That's right.
Right? Or something's wrong. So
that's 100%.
That's why we're in the work. We're truly in the work to help people. It's not fair to keep giving people keys to a classroom, keys to a building, or keys to a campus and say, go do your job. I'm like, really help me. Somebody help me be great, right? Because I want to be. I want to be that person in the interview chair. That's just the approach we take.
That's awesome. All right, let's have a little bit of fun before we wrap up. Now, I think, are you and Joe buddies, Sanfilippo, or no? I thought I saw.
Don't know him at all.
Okay.
Are you gonna force me to have to admit he's probably my best friend? Yeah.
Well, so, and I had Joe on. He was great, but I got a question. Maybe you can answer. Why is all of his videos looks like he's on Survivor alone, like walking through the woods? I'm like, Joe, like I can't. I'm just a Texas guy, likes to hunt every now and again. Like you're out there like scaling mountains, doing the interview, like coaching somebody, flying some. I'm like, hey man, you don't have to bring that type of A game. Just we're gonna be okay. But
us Northerners up in the northern Wisconsin area, it's a little rough up there. So
he was so great, man.
Awesome, he's awesome. Yeah, you got a gem there. So absolutely.
No. And then the other question, so when you do you ever find yourself going into coaching mode with family members or significant others, and you have to get out and they have to check you a little bit?
Only my wife, but she sits here all the time. Actually, she uses it against me. That's how it works, Rick. She'll say things like, Jimmy, I think you're a little bit on the perimeter right now. I think you're on the perimeter, which in our world means you're out here and you got to reflect here. You're causing this, Jimmy, not nobody else. I think you're on the perimeter right now. Yes, it's good in that sense because it does hold you. That's the point, though, right? If people know who you want to be, think about it. I always tell people, you're never going to be that person unless you give people permission to help you be that person. So that's what's so important, that clarity, right? That people know exactly who you want to be because you're going to need help to be who you want to be. No one can do this crazy job by themselves or even live life by themselves, right? That's why we surround ourselves with people that we love and trust. The trust is the key because it's the trust people that are going to say, hey, Rick, you're acting like a jerk right now. Knock it off, right? But your friend can say that to you. You're like, hey, you're right, dude. But somebody else says that to you, you get all defensive and want to, like, hey, you're not going to talk to me that way, right? So that's why we have to surround ourselves with these people. So, but yes, I try to stay away from that. They do jab at me a little bit sometimes, but yes, I know it's done in good fun, and I also know it's done because, well, I believe they respect the work I do and admire the work we do. So it's all good. So yeah.
Awesome. Well, man, I can't thank you enough. And Jimmy, if someone that sees this, listens to this, wants to get in touch with you, interested in services or just talking to you about what possibilities are, like, can you shout out your website, your socials, anything that you'd like to share?
Yeah, I think just go to jimmycasas.com. It's the easiest way to do it. Everything is there. If you need something, you can reach out. I do respond to all my own, all social media I do myself, but obviously I have a team that surrounds me that responds back. But I see everything that comes through. So oftentimes if it's more personal, I'll respond to it because I want to keep in touch with people because I'm here to help. So remember what we always say, Rick, I used to be a high school principal for so long, worked a bazillion hours a day, but now I don't even have a real job. So I have all the time in the world. So if you need me. So, but yeah, just go to jimmycasas.com. And I think anything they want, they can find there. So, yeah.
Well, outstanding. And again, appreciate your time so much and have heard nothing but great things, unsolicited, from some of our folks that you've done work with in Texas. And, good Lord knows that Texas could use some help because times are tough in districts and it's a little bit of a crazy atmosphere right now. So we appreciate you so much. And for all those that are joining us, please check out Jimmy. I mean, good dude, very, very down to earth. And that's kind of really what I wanted to find out today. So worth your time, worth your effort. And we will see you next time on The Path Forward.